here with what I hope will be just a useful study technique. If your mind is spinning with all these letters and all the different hormones and having a hard time placing them all, you can go online and Google, endocrine gland images, and you can find some good ones that I think will help you organize. I'm also going to share a table. It came up with a couple of students at the end of today's call, but a table that would just list all the hormones and their target organs. And while those are useful, I do think there's a lot of value in creating a study tool that's really simple, like I'm going to show you, to keep all of these endocrine glands and their hormones straight. I was going to use like a fancy one from the textbook, and I went stick figure. I went full on stick figure because I can't draw, and I want you all to see that there's value even with limited artistic abilities, and actually putting pen to paper and seeing what you can come up with. One of the best study tools is really, the more frequently you can recall and download information from your head, the more it's likely to stick. So I would encourage you to take out a blank sheet of paper and see if you can draw all of the key primary endocrine glands. So I've taken a stab at doing that here, and I'm going to kind of zoom in on some of them, but you can see this is going to be the thyroid. Here you're going to have the hypothalamus and the pituitary. I've got the pineal gland here, right? Pancreas and adrenal glands. And so for each of these, you can think, okay, what are the key hormones? What does the teacher want me to know about the particular hormones that are released from here? So the way I think about it is, what is the endocrine gland? What are the key hormones that are released from there? And then the third piece of this that I think is useful is, what is the target of that hormone? Where is it heading? So let me kind of fill this in a little bit to show you what I mean. So the thyroid gland, right, it is going to release thyroid hormone. That one's pretty straightforward, right? And technically it's actually T3 and T4. The target of T3 and T4, thyroid hormone is responsible for metabolism, thyroid hormones. And so every cell in the body is actually going to be a target for T3, T4. It goes everywhere. This is supposed to be the pineal gland up here, and I can show you real quickly on another app where the pineal gland and the thymus are. The thymus is one that we don't talk about it, but I know it's on your study guide for lab. But this is supposed to be the pineal gland, the posterior side of what's supposed to be a brain stem up here. And the pineal glands, see if you can recall what hormone it releases. And you're going to draw a blank in doing this exercise, but that's okay. Then you at least know where to go back and study and to put your efforts. So think, okay, the pineal gland, maybe you put melanin. That's a common mistake that I see. So melanin is the pigment in your skin. Pineal gland is going to secrete melatonin, which is a hormone that's involved in circadian rhythms. It's thought to initiate sleep. A lot of people dose with melatonin for better or worse. Happy to talk about that in the next call if anybody's interested. Coming down here, so right, this is going to be the pancreas. And the pancreas is one of those that is a secondary endocrine gland, meaning that its primary function is actually a digestive one, but it also does secrete these hormones. And so, okay, maybe you draw a blank here, and in your study guide, you just have a big question mark. Keep going, like move on to the pituitary gland, move on to the adrenal gland, and see how far you can get. The pancreas, its major functions is to control blood sugar. And so the pancreas is going to secrete your insulin and your glucagon. And maybe you're on a roll and you're also thinking, okay, blood sugar. So insulin is going to decrease glucose in the blood, and glucagon is going to increase glucose. So just pulling out a blank sheet of paper is one of the best study tools that you can come up with. When I meet with students in the library in a normal semester, we like to use the big whiteboard, and we get these big diagrams going on the board. But these sorts of exercises are really useful. bear with me a second. I'm just going to clear a little bit of space and slide over to show you how you might use this more specifically for the pituitary. I didn't mean to erase that. I meant to highlight it. So I'm going to slide over. Okay, so there's obviously way too much detail to squeeze into this little graphic. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to blow up the posterior pituitary, the anterior pituitary, and then upstream of that would be the hypothalamus. And then see what you can remember, right? So the posterior pituitary, it is going to secrete oxytocin. And then see if you can recall the other one, ADH. And maybe that's as far as you get. Maybe you can't think of any of the target organs for those hormones, and that's fine. Again, you can come back to it. ADH works to regulate hydration levels. And while we haven't gotten to the kidney yet, I think most of us have an intuitive understanding that the kidneys do help us regulate fluid levels. So for the time being, you can just think, okay, ADH targets the kidneys. And then if you can fill in more details at this point, do, but don't feel pressured. You can just keep it big picture for now as a study tool if you need. And then you can come back, in a couple of days and try it again. I think doing something like this will save you time. It will allow you to be really targeted with your reading. I totally blanked on what oxytocin does. I can't remember. Go back to that specific part of the textbook and read that. Oxytocin, its targets are going to be the uterus in females. And in the males, it actually targets the vas deferens, which is a tube through which sperm is going to be carried. So thinking about things in this way can be useful. Over on the anterior pituitary side, there are a lot. This is the one, right? Your pituitary is your master endocrine gland. So there are so many. Let's say the only one you can remember is growth hormone. And that's fine, right? Then you need to go back and study the anterior pituitary a little bit more. Maybe you get a little bit further and you remember, okay, there's one hormone that acts on the adrenal cortex, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was. And so you've at least got something down on your page, right? Something to go down to trigger your memory. And so that something, right, is going to be ACTH. So the originating gland is the anterior pituitary. It releases ACTH, that's the hormone. And then the target of ACTH is the adrenal cortex. The target of growth hormone are going to be muscles and bones. Growth hormone also has an anti-insulin effect. So if insulin lowers blood sugar, growth hormone also has the ability to raise blood sugar, and it does so through a process called gluconeogenesis that we'll get to later, just a little preview of what's to come. What's another hormone that comes from the anterior pituitary? How about TSH? And if the alphabet soup starts to get you, right, it's a lot of letters and mnemonics. And I get that. I'm looking at the page right now, and it's just a lot of letters. And if you start to get lost, then use the words, right? If that's more useful, write those out, because this one is actually telling you what it does. I will note that on the quizzes, I use both the full word as well as the abbreviations. So thyroid stimulating, and then the H is hormone. So this one, guess what its target organ is going to be? It's going to be your thyroid, of course, right? It's going to be your thyroid. Okay. So hopefully that gives you kind of a sense for what I think is a really useful tool. Yes, you can find really good graphics, really good images, really good tables that just list it all out for you. But how do you learn it, right? How do you learn from that? I think flashcards are limited, right? Maybe you have a flashcard that has adrenocorticotropic hormone on one side, and on the other side, where do you begin, right? What do you say about what that hormone does? So I think having a graphic gives you that visual that you need to be able to kind of envision these things anatomically in the body. So here is an awesome drawing of the adrenal gland, right? So the adrenal medulla I have shaded here in blue, right? So remember, this is neural. And so this is going to be, you want to think fight or flight. So we're going to have norepinephrine and epinephrine coming from here. Okay. The rest of this, right? All of this mass, this is all cortex and it wraps all the way around. So everything in red is going to be part of the adrenal cortex. This is where you have all the layers. So I highlight this in the other video that I have, but this is where you have the layer, right, that releases aldosterone, which is going to be the outermost layer. You've got the layer that's going to release cortisol, which is going to be the next layer, right? GFRM. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I go through it really succinctly in the other video. But again, doing some sort of a graphic like this is useful. So first one, okay, maybe I get aldosterone, and I remember I remember that the hormone that it comes from the adrenal gland, but I can't remember for the life of me what it does. Stop there, right? Move on to the next. Okay, I know cortisol comes from this gland. And when I think of cortisol, I think of stress. Write that down, right? Get it in there. The other thing you want to think about with cortisol is sugar, right? So cortisol raises glucose levels. So when I do the blood sugar sex magic mnemonic, right? Cortisol is the one that's associated with sugar. If you are in a flight, so cortisol stress, in a stressful situation, you need energy to be able to help you handle it. So that's why the body increases glucose. But you can imagine that over time, people have experienced chronic stress that can ultimately lead to higher blood sugar levels than would be ideal. Aldosterone, right? What it's going to do, its target organ is going to be the kidneys. It's going to help us to retain fluid, which is going to help us to increase blood pressure. Okay. Let me go back to my initial image here. See what else I can add. I think that's all I want to say for now, but hopefully that's useful. Again, just a different way of studying and approaching this, that where you aren't confined by a table that's already done for you. I think hopefully this is useful. All right, guys, thanks.